So Crusader Kings 3 is in the early days of its long-term DLC lifespan, and with the Fate of Iberia being the third DLC announced, I wanted to take the time to make a video talking about some changes, ideas and thoughts I have to potentially make the game even better. Opinions can be so polarised on these kind of topics, so I have no doubt I'll receive disagreements and you might not agree with me, but that's okay, they're just my ideas, and you're welcome to tell me anything you agree or disagree with me about in the comments. Hopefully my ideas aren't too drastically changing to the game. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The Great Blademaster Rework. So my first point will be about this trait here, Blademaster. And at first glance it seems an odd, minor thing to focus on, and you'd be right. However, there is something about CK3 that confuses me. Why do old people forget how to use a sword? To explain, once you reach the age of 45, you have a 10% chance to lose 1 prowess each year, and every year you get older, this increases by 1.5%. So 46 it's 11.5, 47 it's 13, and on it goes. So now let's say I am a 65-year-old warrior, a veteran of 2 crusades, a lauded marshal under the King of France, and I would have a 2-star Blademaster trait. It is surprising to me then that it's possible to have 0 prowess, because once I started to hit 45, it began ticking down every year until I hit 0. Now in premise I agree with the mechanic. I think it's it's a good way of showing that the older people get, the worse they're going to be. But I don't agree that people who have skill and knowledge with, wielding weaponry would forget everything just because they're getting older. I don't necessarily think a 60-year-old is incapable when back when they were 45 they were the most capable person in the country. So here's my change. The old age prowess reduction modifier. Simply put, the reduction on prowess from old age would be reduced by a percentage, let's say 25% for 1 star, 50% for 2 and 75% for 3 stars. And the point being that the most legendary swordsmen will be far less likely to have forgotten everything they've done just because they're getting older. It is worth remembering that there is a precedent for what I'm suggesting, which is the graceful aging at the end of the Kin dynasty legacy tree. And so to finalise my example, let's say my 65-year-old marshal, who previously had 16 prowess and is now at 0, wouldn't have a necessary 16 minus modifier because it would be reduced by Blademaster, so 50% off. Now they only have 8 prowess lost, and they get to keep the other 8. There are of course other ways you could do this, including changing the way the percentages work for the rate of gaining it, or making that the baseline is affected. There are tons of different ways to do it, but my main focus is I think there should be more grace for people who have experience and knowledge wielding weaponry to retain some of that knowledge even if they're getting old. Character creation presets. This is arguably an even smaller change than the previous one, but when you spend like a good half an hour designing your custom character, you design how they look, their hair, you save it. You create their dynasty banner with some cool logo, you save it. You create their traits, their skills, their age, and you can't save it only to start the game and die to a Viking Varangian conquest. So my basic suggestion is adding just a small additional part somewhere to the right section of the character creation screen, just to save an additional preset for any sort of specific skill, age and trait setup that you might have, which is really just useful for going back and restarting in case you die early on and feel the need to have to go back and restart. Or perhaps if you play like a recurring character and you kind of have planned what your 400 point limit character could be. Holy Site Rework. Okay, so going from some pretty not too impactful changes, let's move to something slightly more dividing. Holy sites. So as it stands right now, every religion has like 5 holy sites. that if they control, they gain bonuses from that holy site. My idea is similar to how we had with cultures. You could change their pillars and traditions, and that would cost an absolute ton of prestige. Well, I'm saying if, but hopefully, if they go around to reworking the religion, there will be an option to change which holy sites that religion has. As it stands right now, there's like paganism, and a lot of the paganism stuff is mainly inside of Central Europe, but I was like, what if I wanted a mainly Britannic paganist religion? Could I make it so that maybe Ireland or Scotland has some holy sites that would be more prevalent? So for, let's say, 10 or 20,000 piety, you could change your holy site from Jerusalem to Dublin. Oblivion Horse Armor DLC. Okay, so how many people did I lose with that title? My next idea is less so about buying armors for non-existent horses in our fictional video games, but reworking how pets and mount systems could work to become more of an artifact character hybridization. As it stands, there are 5 key animals to the game seen across pets, mounts and armies. Those are primarily dogs and cats as pets, and horses, elephants and camels as mounts. We have some good interactions with them as it stands. You can pet them and you can skin them, the latter being my personal favourite. I hope in a future DLC there will be some consideration to bring back the portraits of the pets from CK2 so you can see them as characters, or maybe have them as your counsellor, and maybe introduce variety of breeds with individual buffs. Because as it stands right now, if you have a cat, you have like an intrigue buff, and if you have a dog, you have a martial buff. But it would be cool to see like different breeds of dogs bring different types of advantages they come with. With the other 3 animals, horses, camels, elephants, it would be even cooler to find a use for the master of the horse court position, who when hired can be asked to find you a mount, so it's not reliant on you having to get it as a random event. You can specifically hire somebody to help get you a mount. The mount could be trained to give you sort of prowess buffs, or you can armor them to make them stronger, and do all of these cool interactions with them so that you can specifically equip them inside your inventory as your mount. I think this would like massively secure their position as being an integral part of your character, and allow you to do something far more passive in between your expansionist wars or suppressing uprisings. You're kind of just, breeding horses. More building variety. So at its front, this seems like an obvious point, but I thought I'd briefly cover how it stands right now. It seems there are, I'd argue, 2 really big points that people want buildings for. They want them for gold, and they want them for levies. And everything else is basically secondary, like building up some additional fort level or garrison. What I thought would be a cool change is to add buildings that actually have very unique changes that come with them. So I came up with some ideas with the Witch Hut. If you have the witch trait, it wouldn't be too surprising to see a count maybe go talk to their local wise woman to see if they could find alternative solutions for doctoring. And so you could have it where if you have a witch hut in one of your counties, you have a 3rd additional option when search for doctor is used, where you can go find the local witch. Some other ideas I had, including torturers being able to build local dungeons to scare the citizens, or even a criminal den, which actively reduces gold income, but could give you specifically unique buffs, such as how sieges are going to work, where maybe they're able to smuggle things in because you've allowed them to exist, increasing siege time for enemies. Or maybe you could use them and they give you scheme power for your murder schemes because you've got the bandits on your side. I'm just saying there's sort of different ways we could go about adding buildings, and I think there are some cool ones you could do. Clear artifact levels. This suggestion comes straight from the CK3 workshop, which is literally just called Clear Artifact Levels, and that's because I just straight up agree with it. As it stands right now, it's kind of difficult to actually differentiate the order of quality unless you learn it between masterwork, famed, illustrious, and also like what counts as like a unique classification and what is a truly unique item to the game. I think having a rework to make sure the ranking system seems a bit clearer and understanding the order and really having a tag that says a true unique item would just help the whole system in general. Good mod. Boats. So sometimes we come up with ideas that are uncertain, questionable, perhaps completely foolish, that may very well break the changes the game had made to begin with, and the entire community hates you and calls you an idiot. You know, boats. As it stands right now, if you want to set sail, all you need is a sum of gold to be sent to the boat gods, and your limitless army can traverse across the seven seas. Now, while I think the system in its current format is pretty good because it's not too complex, it's just, gold equals boats, I think there could be a boat mechanic to offset the cost factor. I think having a standing navy in the same capacity of EU4 is perhaps not the best. However, what we could look at is how convoys work in Hearts of Iron 4. You have sort of an abstract ship number which can be used to transport a certain amount of units around the map. Hypothetically, you could have a system whereby, let's say you build a stockpile of ships, and for each ship it can offset the cost of embarking a set number of troops. For example, if you had a maximum of 10 ships, and each ship could only hold 50 men, you could embark 500 men with no gold cost, but every man you send after that is going to cost you gold. The downfall would be, of course, you'd need to do a little bit of maintenance on those ships, so it will be up to you to decide whether you disembark often enough to justify building and maintaining those transport ships. As I say, ideas like this take a lot of thought and balancing, and I don't want to ruin what is a good simple system with too much complexity, because CK3 in its current form is very easy to pick up, and I think it would be good to preserve that for new players, but I like boats and they could be in the game. Decline the HRE vote. I want to decline the HRE. I don't want it. I do not want it. I will take a fame hit to decline it. I would even take a light prestige hit, but I do not want it. Get the crown off my head. Jesus. Organisations. Hopefully, with future DLCs, we will see a rework to organisations, those currently being mercenaries and holy orders, who work as armies for hire, the holy orders being a little bit more stringent about who they'll fight for and constantly asking you for free real estate. I think these groups are really interesting, and I hope there will be some DLC in the future adding more mechanics with how you interact with them, maybe making them sort of a influenceable faction within your country. If you give them too much land, and they'll contend with you and try and supplant you to start their own Crusader state. On the flip side though, there's also the possibility to add even more types of organisations to the game, and one I would really love to see is witches' covens. In the current game, if you are a witch, you have a decision where if you can convince enough of your family members to join you and your crow-killing ways, you can form a witch's coven. However, imagine if you could take this position as head of the coven, such as head of a religious order or head of a mercenary group, and use your family coven to do interesting things such as kidnappings or gaining influence, spreading diseases, assassinating kings. I don't know, I think all of these are really cool things that an underground witches' coven could become, because in its current form, I think it's just a dynasty buff, so kind of light. Cultural traditions. I thought an easy way to end my list would be talking about adding something that I'm pretty sure they're going to keep adding, even if I didn't say this. So I can say no matter what that they did add one of my suggestions, and I was right 100%. Anyway, here are a few ideas I had for some possible traditions that are slightly different than what we have currently, but hopefully are still keeping within the game. Accepted banditry. Bandits are a commonplace among this culture, and pretty much everyone seems okay that counts of the local region will commit crimes. So, anyone with a count tier title and with a serious criminal trait, such as murderer, has the ability to raid. Revered Blademasters. Blademaster trait gains more opinion, and you can spar with Knight to level up the Blademaster trait. I really like the Blademaster trait. Dwarf Acceptance. The Dwarf trait is no longer seen as a negative congenital trait by your culture. And Giant Acceptance. It does the same as with the Dwarf trait, but now Giant is seen as a positive congenital trait by your culture. Clean Street Keepers. It just means that the streets of your city are more likely to be kept clean because they're something that, people want to keep clean, and thus there will be, for all characters of this culture, a slight disease resistance buff, and diseases are less likely to happen to people of this culture. Anyway, that's my suggestions. I won't keep you any longer. If you liked some of them, feel free to tell me. If you think I'm an idiot, feel free to tell me. I don't mind. I just like talking about this kind of stuff, and I'm interested to hear what people think. So thank you for watching. You can like and subscribe if you want and do all that stuff. And hopefully CK3 adds some stuff like this. Okay, I'll see you all later. Adios. Bye.